I wasn't going to lapel up when I'm only speaking for 2 minutes. So. Good morning. If we could have everyone take their seats, we'll start in about a minute here. Thanks. Wow, that was quick. You guys got quite quick. I guess we won't wait a full minute. All right. Everyone hear me okay? Is this too loud? All right. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jim Hayes. I'm the Deputy City Manager. I just wanted to make a couple of opening remarks before we turn over to Ryan to introduce our speaker. First of all, thank you for coming today. I know it was probably told to you this is mandatory, but thank you for coming all the same. It's really important that we start to embrace some of these changes in the organization, and a lot of this training that we're going to talk about over the next several weeks is, really the first step in getting that done. The leadership team has met in retreats. We had one in February, we had one in June, and we really started talking about what is the long-term vision for the organization. And we really started to articulate that and how we could, increase the organization's excellence, if you will. The big reason behind all this is because we went from 25 to 50,000 people in a very short period of time, over 10 to 12 years, and our long-term vision for this community is to get to 100 to 150,000 people. So the 300 employees or so that we have right now, that's probably going to increase. And so there's going to be great opportunities for a lot of people in the organization to grow, take on new roles, exhibit more leadership as we bring in a lot of new people to the organization. The big challenge with that, too, is that as we look at our city of 50,000 people, we are starting to make a name for ourselves, if you will, in the region. And so there's a lot of people watching our community and how we're growing and how we're managing that growth. So one of the things that we really wanted to do is we got to become a little more sophisticated. Not to say that we were unsophisticated before, but that the pace of the things that we're going to be doing here and the growth that all of us need to go through, we're going to have to get a lot of systems and processes in place to, again, relentlessly pursue that operational excellence that we're all striving for. I think it's important to remember the citywide values, and I'm not going to go over them in great detail. I'm just going to read them off. And so keep an open mind as you're going through this training over the next several weeks that this is kind of the filter you should run everything through as you're listening to the speakers. So, of course, honesty and integrity, community, teamwork, communications, respect, competence and knowledge, achievement, and creativity and innovation. Again, we're requesting everyone keep an open mind. It's going to take, I would say, 3 simple steps to implement this. And we're all going to go at a different pace, but it's understanding the information that we're presenting, then getting to a stage of acceptance, and then thirdly is active support for what we're doing. 3 simple things, but we're asking that of all of you as we go through this process. The other thing I wanted to point out, we heard last Friday from some employees that they were not aware of this training or these new standards that we're setting, and so that's unfortunate. We heard that. We were hoping that a lot of the departments and division managers would get that information down to their staff. We realize not everyone's on email, so it's a lot of face-to-face interaction and conversation with folks that you're managing. But there's also a good news story behind that, is that's why we're all here. We've got trainings like this. We've got another organizational transformation trainings in the next week. So it's okay if someone hasn't heard everything about it. As long as they're participating in this, they will get up to speed, and that'll help them get through that first step of understanding. So again, thank you all for coming, and I'm going to turn over to Ryan to introduce our speaker.
And just to kind of continue with that training part of it, This group and those that weren't able to make it here, this kind of the management level, this is a kind of a subset of the bigger training program that we're doing. So this is the leadership development piece of it. So, thank you guys for being here. And the idea is just to really focus on that leadership development aspect of kind of your jobs, your roles that you have within this organization. And with that, what Gretchen's going to be able to do is she's going to be able to kind of show how we deal with underperformers, poor performance. Eventually, this is going to lead to some of the other stuff that we want to do down the line. So during the next retreat, we're going to have a coaching and mentoring training. That'll be geared, again, towards the leadership. And then also on our radar, and we are kind of reprioritizing, is going to be a focus on performance management, performance evaluations. We know that is something that is definitely would be good for our alignment. So we're going to work on that. And to kind of help us out with that process is Gretchen Tobin. She is an executive coach, trainer, and management consultant with over 33 years of experience, leading people and organizations to achieve high market growth, improve efficiencies, and measurable improvements in leadership effectiveness. Her background includes 14 years of coaching senior managers and individuals in government with high tech, plus 22 years of experience in management at Hewlett-Packard, including 10 years in senior management. She now runs her own coaching company doing business coaching and training. She is a coaching vendor of choice for the city of Fort Collins and several other companies. So please help me welcome Gretchen Tobin.
Thanks. Can you all hear me? I have a little voice. Is it okay in the back? Yes? Okay, good. So I am here to talk to you about managing with backbone. There are in management maybe two basic skills. It's the people side. Some people call that the heart side. The other side is the backbone. And that's about crisp, clear accountability, measuring the performance that the city expects, and making sure it happens. And so later on, as you get into coaching and mentoring, you'll get into the gentler side of management. And what I'm going to talk about is if that gentler side of management doesn't work for you, here's some very specific tools and tricks that will help you get performance up to par. This is so important because if you ignore performance problems, what happens? They get ugly. If you face them, it may not be particularly fun, but it gets clarified. Many times it gets improved. Sometimes people choose to leave. Eventually, you may have to fire someone. But facing it sooner makes your job easier. If you ignore it, you get to face it every day. And that's not much fun. So I want to give you some very specific tools focused in on underperformers. So I always like to give you the headline at the very beginning. It's about results. It's not about activities. So I'm sure you've had a lot of dialogue here about it's not about people showing up for work and putting in their hours. It's about delivering the results that the people in the city expect of you. For a streets person, that might be making sure the roads are fixed at the lowest possible cost. If someone's in public relations, it's not about how many press releases you get out. It's about the number of times that you have positive communications in the local newspapers that lead to an improvement in citizen perception of your service. So it's that shift from coming in and doing your work to really focusing in on what are the results that citizens expect of you and how can you measure them. Blame doesn't get results. It sets up this point-counterpoint thing. Well, you're not doing your job. Well, you're not doing your job. And so blame doesn't work, and you have to get out of that. Get really clear about your backbone. So your backbone is about crisp clarity of what are the results expected of your department, communicating that clearly to your staff, and holding them accountable. And not focusing in on attitude, focusing in on behavior. So the sooner you confront it, the easier it gets. If you let it fester, it's painful. And probably we've all done that at one point in our career or another. I'm going to teach you a specific technique to build ownership in the employee by asking tough questions. And during this workshop, I'll ask you to practice that. So just at your tables, not up here. And it is, of course, about follow-up. So you can't have one conversation and assume it'll work. It's once a week, it's once every 2 weeks to make sure it happens. So by performance management, what I mean is a system that ensures that the results that the city expects are in fact delivered through a combination of crisp objectives, clear metrics, making sure that people get feedback, and holding them accountable. You need to be clear about that accountability and how you'll measure it, and make sure that you know it's business, it's not personal. Sometimes our tough employees will make it look personal, and one of the things we get to do is step back and be objective. I'm going to say the clear expectations a lot. Be crisp and clear. So I coach a lot of people, and almost every client I have is not quite clear enough about what they expect. So what is crystal clear in your mind may not be crystal clear to your employee. And so that's an important skill. Jim did a nice job of linking this to the overall city objectives. So you want to make sure whatever your department is doing, it's clear. Here's what Commerce City needs. Here's what my department needs. Here's what my group needs. So that's called cascading objectives. Honest, timely feedback. If you get to an evaluation and the employee is surprised, it's painful. And so try and make a point of once a week, once a month, delivering that timely feedback so there are no surprises. And unfortunately, all this takes planning time. So you do have to take time to plan what's your interaction with this employee going to be, how are you going to hold them accountable. You have to take a minute to think through. Later on, Kathy and I are going to do a role play, and she's going to play a tough employee. And by the way, I have no idea what she's going to zing me with. All I have known is I've asked her to make it lively. I will have written questions here because this technique is not something that just rolls off. So you'll see me working with a script, and that's one of the tricks. So I think I've defined management backbone. It's confronting underperformance. It's not reacting to what comes in. It's planning how you want to interact with some of these tough employees, role modeling the right behavior, and planning in advance. Some of you are middle managers. Some of you are first-level supervisors. Just a quick thing, that middle management is there to help facilitate change around this accountability. And so trying to help the supervisors underneath you get clearer about what they expect and how they'll measure it is part of your role. And training your managers. Are there any questions about just performance management and backbone before I keep moving to specific tools? Anyone have a story where by being clear, they were able to change someone's performance that you could tell in a sentence or two? Anyone willing to jump in? Okay, I'll keep going. So, one of the challenges is the yelling, screaming, and threatening approach. That looks like, you know what needs to be done, go do it. Get this done now. I'm sick of you not showing up on time, whatever it might be. Feels good. Doesn't work. Because it sets up this tension between you and them, which can become almost a power struggle if it degenerates. There's the buddy factor. You like these people. You've worked with them for years. And you wish you could be their friend. As their supervisor, you want to be friendly, but not their friend. And so stepping aside from that friendship is an important part of your role. It's hard work. Do any of us like facing this ugly stuff, telling people they're underperforming? No, it's not fun. But it gets worse if you don't. And I'm late. We're too busy. So obviously I've done management. I hope it's clear that I've done management for decades. I have improved people's performance. I have found ways to get them to leave. I have fired people. My experience has been, if I don't take the time to do it right up front, it takes 3 to 4 to 5 times as long to sort of fix it later. And so I guess my experience says, do it right up front, take the time to plan, and have clear expectations. I want you to look inside yourself for a moment around where are you around managing expectations and managing performance. Some of you may be brand new and you're not quite sure how to do it. Others may say, I can't, this is ugly. Some of you acknowledge the realities. You've been around the block quite a bit and you know you have to do this. Some of you are ready to, let's get this fixed so I can get on with my important job, which is adding operational excellence to this city. So I just ask you to reflect on this skill. Where are you and where would you like to be? One of the things I do as a coach is ask people to set intentions. And this is something you have to be very intentional about. There's the kinds of conversations I need to have with certain people that will improve results. I think I'm going to move through this one quickly so I can get on to some other things. Unfortunately, if there's a blame game going on, you have to start with yourself because you are the leader. It's about asking, have I been clear with my expectations? Have I been clear about what results look like? Have I been clear about what's the impact of non-results? Am I a good role model? Are priorities clear? Are people trained? Have I given feedback? And this is one of the ones that I see. Am I incenting non-performance because I'm rescuing them? When someone misses a deadline, I, as a leader, jump in to fix it. So, unfortunately, we have to start with ourselves. This is the overall model I'm going to be presenting to you. It's from a book called Coaching for Improved Performance. Each of the departments will have a copy of this book. And so if you get back to the office and you want to use some of these techniques, I would suggest there's actually a chapter in here, chapter 10, which has very specific examples of what I will show you. So that if you're about to have a hard conversation, you could scan through that chapter 10 and get some examples of very specific questions you could use to draw out ownership in the employee. The bottom line on this training is to get the employee to own the problem. It's not your problem, it's their problem. If you can get them to own it, then and be clear about what the consequences of them not knowing it are, then most people will fix it. So here's the whole approach. You start with preparation. Preparation is about gathering data. On this date, at this time, you said this, and the impact was that. It's the very specifics. And part of this process is taking the notes and having them in one place and being able to call them up. I will show you how to diagnose a problem. So with some employees, the issue is personal problems at home. With some, the issue is they don't quite know how to do the new job that's expected of them. They knew the one 5 years ago. They don't quite get the one now. If you can't diagnose what's happening with that employee, you may not be able to fix it efficiently. And so I'll give you some techniques for diagnosis, and I'll actually ask you to practice it. Alignment is really important. I had a tough employee who used to be 3 levels above me. He hated his job. He spent all his time complaining about it. He was one of those guys that managed up but didn't do anything else. He was a schmooze guy. He was demoted because of his lack of results, and he found himself in a job that he hated, and he decided to let the entire work group know about it, let everybody know about it. He was grousing in meetings. He was grousing about the boss behind the scenes. He was more intent on complaining than delivering anything. His boss worked for me. I was the second level. We got really clear about what we expected in terms of projects on time. We also got really clear about what we expected in behavior. That we expected him, if he had an issue with his supervisor, he was to go directly to her in private. That there would be absolutely no grousing in public forums. That everything would be done privately offline. And we got really clear about, here's your negative behavior and here's what we're going to hold accountable. She delivered that to him. He, of course, immediately came to me and said, that woman doesn't like me and she's out to get me and blah, 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 blah. And I did this exact same script. Here's what we expect of you. Here's how we'll measure it. Here's how we'll hold you accountable. Here are the ramifications over time. He immediately went to my boss, who was the general manager of a thing. And the general manager sort of said the same thing tougher. Said, look, guy, these people are going to hold you accountable. This is the job I pay you to do. You have a choice. You can do the job. You could leave, or you could leave voluntarily, or you could leave involuntarily. Which is your choice? We had the exact same script. And 2 weeks later, he left because we were all against him. And it was a perfect outcome because he wasn't ready to do the work. So that alignment up and down the chain around how you're going to hold accountability and having the same script is really important. Clean up your emotions. I was angry with this man. We were paying him big bucks to do almost nothing. I couldn't have that anger in the presentation. I had to be clear, objective. Here's what we expect. So before you do this, clean out your emotions. Go vent to a friend, whatever it takes. Go for a jog. Take Taekwondo. Doesn't matter. Clean out the emotions and focus in on what the city pays people to do. And build your backbone. Get really clear about what you want to do and what the outcome should be. Any questions about that? Have any of you tried some of this? Yes? Does it work? Yes. Takes time, but it works. You then have the conversation. The biggest thing to do is get ownership of the problem. So if the person leaves your office thinking it's your problem, you may not get the changes that you want. You have to have them know it is their problem and they get to fix it. You want the consequences to be really clear. You want to be really clear about my expectations, and I'll role model this in a minute. What are the alternatives to fix it? What's the action plan, and what are the next steps? And this needs to be done at all levels. Yesterday I sat down with the CEO and made it clear to him that I needed a development plan from him in the next 2 weeks, that here's what his board of directors expected, and that I was looking to him to come back to me in 2 weeks to deliver his plan. So this happens at whatever level in the organization needs to be held accountable. Then you follow up, weekly monitoring, detailed documentation. If needed, you go into a performance improvement plan where it's all written down. If you have to, written warning. If you have to, termination. So there's a gap between where they're performing today and where you want to, and these are the steps that you take them through. Any questions about these steps before I go into more detail on them? Any concerns you have about this process and how it might work?
Sometimes the ownership is probably the biggest hiccup. When I've worked with employees, that they don't want to take ownership. So, I mean, how many conversations do you end up having with somebody? I mean, 3, 4, I mean, is that what you do then in the weekly monitoring?
Well, yes, definitely getting the ownership of the employee is the hardest part, because if you don't have that ownership, you're probably not going to get the changes. This technique is something that if the normal coaching doesn't work, you use. If the person gets, for example, abusive, what you do is stop the conversation and have another one 2 days later. I would like to have a professional conversation with you, holding you accountable. I will be rescheduling with you in 2 days. For the most part, this technique should work with 1 or 2 sessions, because it is most coaching and mentoring, which you'll be getting in your upcoming class, is about asking open-ended questions. What do you see as the big challenges in this job? What is your plan to address this? Give me some ideas. That's all open-ended questions. In this technique, I'm going to use closed-end questions. And that closed-end questions forces you to get them to agree or not agree. What do you think? And here's an example of it. What do you think is the impact on your peers if you stomp out of our staff meeting early saying, I've had it? Is it positive toward your peers, or is it negative? And if they don't answer the question, you ask it again. And so it asks them to speak to their accountability. What we tend to do as supervisors, I used to do it, is I'd lecture. I'd go into lecture mode. Let me tell you what we need. And the employee was like, in this technique, you get them to tell you the impact of their actions. And that forces ownership. And we'll roll, Kathy's going to give me a hard time shortly, and you'll get to see it. So this is the overall technique, and I'll go into it in more detail. But the first thing is to diagnose what is the real issue. Often we think it's an attitude issue. And by the way, we should be talking about behavior, not attitudes. I'm not trained to be a psychologist. I don't know what drives people's attitudes. It should be about behavior on the job. So first you have to diagnose it, and I am going to ask you to practice this in a minute. So what I'd like you to do is think about someone who is underperforming in your organization. If you don't have people that are seriously in trouble, maybe you'll pick someone who's slightly under where you need them to be. And if you have all-star performers, I'm sure you can think of someone near your organization or an experience you've had in the past. So pick a person, and I'm going to ask you to spend a few minutes diagnosing it, and I'll walk you through the steps. You have a piece of paper which gives you the technique in writing, so that later when you go back, you'd be able to use some notes to figure out how to do this. And I believe on the second page there is a list of diagnosis questions. Is it the second or the third page? Third page. You'll find these questions. So in terms of diagnosing the issue, you want to start with, is this worth your time? If not, ignore it. So an example of, is it worth my time, would be someone chews gum in an annoying fashion in your staff meetings. Is that worth the battle? Nah. No, not worth it. Ignore it. Get over it. Pick your battles. Does the person know their performance is unsatisfactory? They may sense that you're a little irritated at them, but they might not know where they're falling way short. It might have worked for them for years, and because the city is changing, it no longer works. And so you have to make sure, think about, do they know that it's unsatisfactory? If not, I want to give them very specific feedback. Do they know what they're supposed to do? If not, then tell them, crisp and clear, here's what's expected. Do they know how to do it? If not, you would want to train them. Their job may be stretching to be more project-based, more proactive, as opposed to just dealing with incoming complaints. And they may not know how to do that, and you may need to train them. Do they know why they should do it? Do they really have that context of why is it important to citizens, to other departments? Are the results within their control? If they're not getting what they need from another department, that's impacting their performance. And that's when it's your job as a manager to remove some obstacles. Sometimes they think their way will work much better than your way. And in that case, you actually need to convince them what are the issues with their approach. Do they think something else is more important? I'm sure we've all had employees that have their favorite thing they love to do, and they'd rather do their favorite thing than the job that you pay them to do. And if that's the case, you need to crisply explain what are the priorities. They may not know the consequences of positive performance. And so you want to be clear, here's what you can expect. If you improve this, you'll get more interesting assignments, you'll get a chance over time to sometimes be acting me. Here are some of the benefits of positive performance. And what are the consequences of negative performance? Sometimes that's about less interesting assignments. Sometimes that's about an annual rating going down. Sometimes that's about their job being at risk. And it is important to be really clear about what those are. Not threatening. If you don't clean this up, you're out of here. That's a threat. This is the kind of performance we expect. It does have consequences. Being at work on time is critical to customer satisfaction. Over time, if you cannot adhere to that, then we may need to go find someone else who can do that. You want to do it in a positive way. For example, saying, this is what I expect. I really hope that you'll be able to meet that expectation. So you're not trying to force them out. You're just holding them accountable. It's different. Any questions as I go along? Okay. Sometimes there are personal problems. There can be problems going on at home. There could be health issues. There could be a whole host of things. And then you get to decide, are you going to accommodate it? Are you going to ask them to fix it? Is it time for a leave of absence? What do you wish to do? If they're unable to do the job you want, you assist if you can, and if you can't, then you go through the formal processes of warning and termination. So what I would like you to do is actually practice this diagnosis. Taking the time, I would like you to pick one employee in your work group where the performance is not quite where you would wish. I would like you to walk through that diagnosis, which is on the third page, and try and figure out what really is the root issue with this employee. We'll take maybe 15 minutes or so to do that. Part of that 15 minutes will be sharing it quickly with someone at your table. So just pair up with twos. I'll give you probably some time to diagnose it. Is it clear what I want you to do? Basically just walk through those questions and try and get clear where do you think the problem is with this performance? And then share it with a peer. Any questions about the exercise I'm asking you to do? I'm here to help. So if you can't diagnose it, Ryan's here to help, Kathy's here to help. Ask for some quick suggestions. Timing's good. Just a quick reminder, I've hit hard the notion of prep. So before you have a great time chatting, spend a minute going through the specific employee and trying to diagnose it before you share, if you would. Thank you. The other thing is, anything you discuss here is confidential. What I ask is that none of the names leave the room. If you're uncomfortable mentioning the name, please don't do this. This should be a safe management forum where this will not leave the room. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So at this point, I'm hoping you're starting to share what you learned in doing this diagnosis so that we can wrap up and have more time to practice the actual discussion. Okay, just a quick sort of 5 sentences. One person, here's what I learned. 5 sentences. Next person, here's what I learned in terms of just the diagnosis. Okay, I'm going to bring you back if you wouldn't mind. So I would love to hear from a few of you, what did you learn in this diagnosis process? Anyone willing to share an insight that came from you or your table partner? Were you able to diagnose what was going on with this particular employee? Yes. What did you learn? Any common challenges that came up? Yeah.
We learned that the employee that previous employers, because we all worked someplace else, we can do that. They were moved around because they were never given clear expectations of
Yes.
of what they were, and they didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so this employee had been moved around 3 supervisors, and then as the last supervisor, we realized that they didn't understand why they had been moved around because they weren't getting clear expectations. So worked with them for a year and sat with them, and they just could never get past what they couldn't see, past the weeds, I guess is another good word. They could always stay here and couldn't figure out.
Yeah, that dilemma of someone who has not been meeting expectations for a long time and has actually been shuffled from one department to the next. It's a terrible disservice to them and to the city. And if you're in that situation, get a sense of the history, at least know what's been done in the past. Get a sense from previous supervisors, if you can, what's worked and what has not worked. And then get to that performance improvement, because the city will never get the results it needs until someone does that job of making sure that people deliver what they're paid to do. And that, by the way, is one of my favorite lines. If you get a really difficult situation where you don't understand me and you don't know what my life's like, and I want to do this, that is not the job the city pays you to do. The city pays you to repair the streets. The city pays you to deliver training classes, whatever it might be. I would like to see you do this job that the city needs. I want to be clear that this is the job we have. It's not the job that you wish to do. So that bluntness is really important. And face it, the sooner you can. And particularly in those situations that you brought up, make sure that you have the alignment of you, your direct supervisor, and anyone else that person may go to try and get their way. because obviously they know how to work the system in most cases. Other challenges that came up in diagnosing it. What were some of the common issues that you discovered in underperformance? Yeah?
The morality of the others around them goes down.
The morale of others. An underperforming person can bring down the entire team. And they can take a team. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tuckman's model of forming, storming, norming, performing. So forming's when everybody's polite. Storming is when everybody argues all the time. Norming is when you're clearly performing at a certain level. And performing is that high-performing team that you don't even have to tell them much. They just go do it. And if you have a problem employee, they can take a team that's in norming and bring them back to storming. Create conflict all over the place. And it makes your job difficult. It makes the job of everyone else in the work group difficult. And therefore, it has to be confronted. What other examples did you see? Anyone talk through one where there's a personal issue that's affecting performance? Yes, did you? No? No. Okay. Yeah.
They can contribute to it, but they can be more than just that. I think it can be. Then you have to identify what that is and try to help in both areas in any way that you can. You're also partially responsible for
Right.
kind of have to sort the whole thing.
Right. So the issue is often it's both a personal problem and a work performance problem, and the two are interacting. And you have to figure out where are there skills, for example, needed on the job, and where are there resources that people need away from the job that can hold them effective. And so you're doing multiple things at once. What other challenges came up? Any quick learnings that came out of your discussion? It takes time. You actually have to think through it. It takes uninterrupted time. So this might be something where you crawl off to a coffee shop uninterrupted. This was a hard environment actually to do it. Any questions or concerns? Was the diagnosis process clear? I'm role modeling clear expectations here. Yeah?
Just a quick question. I know a lot of this is on evaluating diagnosing underperformance. Would there ever be a need to diagnose overperformance?
That's a wonderful question. The times I can think of diagnosing overperformance would certainly be burnout is an area where if someone is overperforming to the point where it's affecting their health, or their ability to enjoy their job, then you would need to do something like this. My sense is with high performers, you use the coaching skills, the open-ended questions, not this tough stuff. So it would be a similar problem, but you would use a much gentler approach with something like burnout. There are cases where people are doing a marvelous job at one thing and not meeting other expectations. And in that case, I would start with the gentle coaching, open-ended questions. Are your priorities clear? And then fall back to possibly this one. Are there other examples people can think of around overperforming? Those were the ones that came to my mind real quickly. Did I answer your question? Just give you some tools? Okay. Any other quick questions? Okay, so there's a script for this stuff, and if you follow the script, it gets easier. I used to think I've been managing for years. I should know how to do this, but some of this stuff is tough, and the script helps. So that's what I'm here to do. Okay, let's do some of the fun stuff. It's almost time for Kathy to get tough on me. So you're now, having diagnosed it, moving into the coaching discussion. Some things. Don't talk down to an employee. When we sound condescending, we're ineffective. Don't give generalizations, give very specifics. On this day, at this time, here are the words you used. Here's the behavior you demonstrated. Don't focus on attitude, focus on behavior and on results. don't assume that they know the problem. The biggest mistake managers make is what's crystal clear in their minds is not crystal clear to the employee. You have to follow up. You have to reward improvements with positive reinforcement. So ask questions to get them to own it. Be very specific. Focus on behavior and results. Be really clear about the ramifications. Follow up, praise, manage behavior and results. Any questions about that one? In planning the meeting, choose a private location, not a restaurant, not a car. I'm afraid to say early in my management career, I thought I had a good rapport with an employee who used to be a miracle worker, and as the job changed, he had gone from being our miracle guy to being an underperformer. I thought I had a really good rapport with him. I took him to lunch. He unfortunately, as I delivered the tough message, ordered a glass of whiskey. That was not the behavior I wanted. So please don't do that. It was a very stupid thing I did. Choose a private, professional location where other people can't hear. Don't do it in a restaurant. Don't do it in a car. No interruptions, no phone calls. Allow plenty of time. You have no idea how long this will take. In some cases, it's easy. In some cases, it's hard. Have all your specifics. Be ready to explain the importance of what the behavior you want is, and have a minimum acceptable outcome. So when I'm going to role play with Kathy, my minimum acceptable outcome is either a plan from her to address her performance or a date when she will give me a plan. If I don't get that, I'm going to schedule another meeting with her within that window to make sure I get it. So you have to know what is the end result you're looking for. So eventually you're going to have to do this after Kathy and I role model it. I am going to ask you to focus on the same employee that you just worked on. So have that employee in mind as we start to go through this process. So here is the technique bit by bit. And you also have it in your written document. The way it works is you read down the left-hand column in order, then you move to the middle, then you move to the right-hand column. So I'm going to pick the situation for this of someone who arrives late for work. First question I would ask is, what's the impact of your arriving late on your customers? Do they feel that they have been served in a responsible and timely manner, or don't they? And I want them to come back, and they may say, oh, my customers are fine. What is the impact of you not being at your desk for that phone call? Does the customer get service? So you drill down until they answer back. What are the consequences? And you end in two alternatives. If you continue to arrive late, are you helping or hindering our customers? Are they getting the kind of timely feedback they need, or aren't they? So you're trying to get them to own that there are consequences of people being late on the service that your customers get. If you arrive late, does that mean you're meeting your hourly deadlines or not meeting your hourly deadlines? Well, and the goal is for them, I guess I'm not meeting my deadlines. That's the goal. As soon as they say that, they've owned the problem. I get most of my stuff done on time. Did you get this project done on time last week? Yes or no? So you get more specific the less they own it. Quick questions about that? Yeah. I'm sorry?
What if they say nothing happened? It shouldn't be a big deal.
If they say nothing happened, it shouldn't be a big deal. You should get crisp and clear about this is what happened. What was the ramifications to your customers, to your peers, to your service, So you want to ask questions that help them see that it did have ramifications. And usually that's about, the results you're expected, the service you're supposed to provide, the way you're supposed to interact according to the values that Jim mentioned earlier. So you want to ask a series of questions that get them to say what the ramifications of their action were to certain constituents. So have them in your hip pocket, in your script, because this is hard to do on the fly. Once they say, I guess I'm impacting customer service. I guess I'm impacting other people's deadlines. I guess I'm impacting someone else's ability to do the rest of the project. Then you shift to this next place. What options do you have? What options might you have for arriving on time at work? And they might say, I could set the alarm clock. I could set 2 alarm clocks. I could put an alarm clock far away from my bed so I have to get out of bed. I could arrive half hour early. And you try and get them, don't critique their options, get a lot of options on the table. This is getting closer to the coaching discussion that you'll be trained on in your next session. But you want them to get a lot of alternatives out on the table, and then you want to probe for what is the real issue. Well, I'm having trouble sleeping. Have you seen a doctor about sleep apnea? So you try and figure out what's the real issue. Is that legal to say things like that? Have you seen a doctor about a health problem? Kathy, is that okay?
As long as you're not making it specific, like when you said sleep apnea, I would stay away from that.
All right.
Take a position about this. Is that perhaps an option for you?
Okay. So generic, have you seen a physician, as opposed to attempting to play diagnosis. Thank you. Probe for the cause. How will you make sure that this will work? You're looking for a plan from them. You ask how it will be solved. How will you ensure you're on time? When will it be solved? When can I expect this to be improved? And if they say in a month, say, I'm sorry, that option doesn't work for me. When can I expect this to be improved? If they won't tell you soon, you will have to tell them, I expect this to be fixed next week. Thanks for their agreement. Thank you for helping. I will be checking back with you next week. End of discussion. You go write down all your notes of what occurred, what they agreed to, what the problem is, etc., so that it's all really well documented. And then you follow up. You check up a week later. You praise improvements. If it doesn't work, you have a similar conversation. So that's the process that I'm going to have you practice. I will, after Kathy and I do our thing, I'll have you role play in twos. The first thing I want you to do is, again, create a script and then role model it with each other. I'll want you to debrief with give each other feedback about how it went and what helped you own the problem as this person you're pretending to be. But we'll do that in a minute. So, all right, Kathy and I are going to role model it. The situation, I have my script. So I was trained on this 20 years ago. I've used it a lot. I've done training classes on it. I still need a script. I have no idea what Kathy will ask me. The situation is that Kathy is not getting along with her peers. She's being grumpy with her peers. And I'm going to have a coaching discussion with her about that. You have the ability, if you wish, to interrupt the role play to ask a clarifying question. For a short period of time, I don't want to take too long on this, you could send a zinger from the audience to watch how I handle it. So it's okay to make this tough. I'm good with that. All right.
Hi, hon. Yeah, well, I don't know. My boss is asking me to come in her office. Can I talk to you later about that? Yeah. Hold on a second.
Kathy, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Can you?
I'm going to have to go. I think she's a little cranky. Okay. Bye.
Well, in light of that recent comment, Kathy, do you know what we're here to talk about?
No.
Okay.
But you're going to tell me, huh?
I am going to tell you, yeah. So I want to give you some concerns I have about your interactions with your peers. Last Monday morning, you were interacting with Julie, and she asked for help on a project, and you said, no way am I going to help out with that HR project. 2 weeks ago, in a staff meeting, after Julie had spoken, you stood up and said, I'm out of here, and left the room in the middle of the staff meeting. 3 weeks ago...
This is a Julie common denominator. It's not me.
The conversation I'm here to talk about is you. I will address Julie in a separate forum, working directly with Julie.
Okay, as long as you're going to work with her, too.
Yeah, so I'm here to talk about you. Another issue is there were 3 customers in the room, and you sort of said to Julie, this is a ridiculous request. So, in that situation, where there were 3 customers in the room, what do you think was the impact to the citizens of you talking about ridiculous projects? Did that make citizens feel that you were there to help them or to be negative?
I don't think I said anything wrong as I'm thinking about it. I think Julie was not the one who's involved in this.
The words that I heard is, well, that's a ridiculous project. What do you think is the impact?
Oh, that one? That was a ridiculous project. Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. I don't have time for that. I have too much on my plate. I told her so. She brought it up in front of the customer.
What do you think is the impact on the customer of you saying ridiculous in front of them? How does that make the customer view the city and its employees? Is it positive or negative?
I guess it would be negative. Oh, man, it kind of forces you to go there.
It does. What do you think was the impact of your peers in that staff meeting when you walked out in a huff and slammed the door? Do they think that you will be a good person to work with in the future, or are they concerned about working with you?
They already know what it's like to work with me, and we all get along fine. We all talk that way in that meeting.
Does that meet the values of City of Commerce around respect and teamwork? Are you meeting them or are you not, Kathy?
I think I'm meeting them.
Let me read to you what respect is. I don't have the exact script. Respect means that you treat people with respect in a way that's highly professional and is honest and problem-solving. Were you honest and positive in that situation or not?
I think I was positive towards defending myself.
Good.
Familiar? Sound familiar?
I'm not here to talk about defending yourself. I'm here to talk about the professionalism with which we interact.
Is this from the training that you're taking, that suddenly you're just going to hold me accountable for all of this stuff? Because, you know, you and I have been out drinking before. I have stories to tell on you. So what changed? I mean, you used to, like, be in my corner, and now you're all over this managing with backbone training thing. Is that what this is about?
What I have learned in the last 6 months to a year is that what this city expects of us is changing. That it's not about just putting in our hours anymore. It's about interacting in a very constructive and positive way, meeting the city's values, and it's about increasing our performance. So what I'm articulating is the expectations of you have changed.
Okay.
Do you want me to be clear about what those expectations are?
How come I'm just hearing about this now?
I did speak to you a month ago when I ended up spending a half an hour with Julie in tears when I had other things to do because you had said that she was a dumb blonde. So I did...
Sorry. Because that would be me.
So I have had this conversation before. My expectations of you...
You were being nice to me then. How am I supposed to know you were being serious? You didn't tell me in a way that I really heard that. I thought we were just joking.
I am trying to be really clear,
Now.
telling you now about what those are.
Okay.
I'm telling you that in advance of any further steps. What do you think are the consequences of you? So I pretty much have her owning it. It's now time to move to consequences. Does anyone else want to throw a zinger before I move to consequences? Feel free. A favorite singer you might run into?
Actually, almost everything I've set up here I've heard before in one way or another.
I'm sure you have. Anyone else have a quick zinger?
Yeah, what's a more common thing that you guys hear that people say in defense of coming to ownership?
You sound like a parrot. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where it's coming from. Yeah.
I'm doing this job for fun. I don't have to be here.
Okay.
I'm doing this job for fun. I don't have to be here.
Okay, you sound like a parrot. I am right now being repetitious because I want to make sure I've been absolutely clear about what the city expects of you. And so I will keep repeating to make sure that I've been clear, because I wish to retain you as an employee meeting the expectations of the city. If you understand and agree, then let's move on.
Is this just
I'm not
me?
sure I've heard it from you.
Is this just me, or is it everybody? Are you doing this? Is everybody doing this with everybody, or is this just me?
Performance management is part of how we're going to drive for increased effectiveness in the city. Every person in the organization will be held accountable to what they deliver. Where there are situations, some situations there's a little gap, some situations there's a big gap. I will be using whatever behavior I need to address the gap. I'm going to get back to your question, which is, I'm just doing the job for fun. I'm doing the job for fun. I love this job. I've been doing it. Why are you on my case? Something like that. Again, I'm going to be repetitive. The job that the city needs you to perform is this job. I understand that you have fun doing that job, but the job we need you to do is this job. Are you willing and able to do that job? So this isn't about fun. This is about delivering results to our citizens, something like that. Okay? So, what do you think of the consequences of your continued negative interactions with Julie to your peers, the rest of your peers? Is this having a positive impact on the team or a negative one?
Okay, you want me to say negative?
Well, what do you think?
I'm sure that they don't like it.
Okay. And part of our values is teamwork so that everyone can interact effectively. What do you think is the impact of us continuing to have these conversations on your annual rating system? Will it be positive or negative?
Sorry.
So if you get that one, and I'll be right with you, if someone either starts crying and can't continue with the conversation or starts bad-mouthing you and acting inappropriately, then basically say, I would like to have this conversation at a time where we can be constructive. Can you continue this conversation, or should we do it again tomorrow? So you can allow that. You had a question.
Yeah, what if they say,
It's where
I can't speak for other people,
I don't know how they would think about it
or how they feel.
or how they would feel about it, so I can't speak for other people.
Okay. Then I could say, here's the specific feedback that I have received from your peers.
Oh, now you're talking to my peers about me. Okay. All right, I hear it. I can see I'm in trouble.
I expect you to address conflict with your peers in a way that is constructive and solves the problem.
I'm not going to say anything to anybody. God.
My intent is that you work constructively with your peers to deliver the projects that need to happen. That is an expectation of the job.
Okay.
What do you think of the ramifications? So we've already talked about the evaluation. What are the options you have for improving this, Kathy? I would love to see you improve this.
Well, I can either say everything really nice and pretty, or I can keep my mouth shut.
What else could you do?
I could grow up, but
What else could you do?
I don't know. Maybe it would be really fun to go to a communications class. You could send me off-site to a communications class. That'd be fun.
Okay.
And I could go with Julie.
What else? What other ideas do you have? This is now a coaching discussion.
I don't know. I don't know. You probably have some ideas. What do you have?
A suggestion I might have would be that whenever you have an issue, that you talk about the situation in non-judgmental language and give several options and ask her ideas. You could go to a crucial conversations class, which you guys will be taking shortly. What do you
Yeah, but I'm a D and she's like a C, so for those of you that have had DISC. So sometimes she just talks on and on and on. I have to tell her, no, I'm going forward. I'm done with this stuff. And I have to shut her down.
What is a way that you could interact with her effectively and in a respectful manner get back to your job?
I'll just stick to the job at hand. That's all I can do with Julie. I'm just going to talk to her about whatever the job is, whatever she wants to talk about, and then just leave it at that. Because otherwise, apparently, I'm not being taken well.
Okay. So what is your plan to address this? You've talked a lot of options.
I'd really like to bring Julie in here, and you and her and I talk this through. Then I think you're going to hear a lot more when you see the interaction.
What I would like to do is address your performance with you and Julie's performance with Julie.
I think it'd be helpful to get us together.
At this point, I would like to manage them separately.
Okay, we'll do it your way.
I am planning on checking back with you in a week to see.
Okay, Julie's on vacation.
I'm not worried about Julie. The conversation is about Kathy.
Oh, so you're saying that this is an issue outside of just Julie?
At the moment, I'm talking about your performance and what the city expects.
Okay.
So we can probably cut it off. It's that steady, thank you.
She told me really give her a hard time, or I'd have cut out a long time ago.
So, questions about that? It does look a little dogmatic and repetitive, but the closed-end questions are building ownership, which is Kathy reflected. It's frustrating because you have to answer one of the two. You had a question.
Just how long would you go with that? You cut it short here for our time, but did you go forever until you got the results you wanted?
Let's see. I wouldn't move on to the next step until I had ownership. The thing that supervisors do most often is they assume they get it and they hurry to the next step. So if you don't have ownership, I would stay in there for an hour trying to get it. If you can't get it after that, or if they become destructive or teary or whatever, it's time to reschedule another conversation at a time when it can be professional. And if you think they say, man, maybe, and then you don't think that they have it, you go right back in a week later and have the same conversation. So the goal is to get ownership of the problem. And you hammer it until you get there, within reason. And I guess I'll just throw in one little comment. There is something called passive-aggressive behavior. I'm not trained to do that, but there are things on the internet that actually describe what is passive-aggressive behavior. And only use these techniques if it's been you've diagnosed it as that's really what's happening. And in that case, it's different. Things have to be in writing. They have to be very dry. If you take away all the emotion, there's some very specific techniques, and if you go on the web, you'll find them, or else pick up my card and I can send them. But the trick is don't diagnose everybody as a passive-aggressive. Kindness works well in many cases. It doesn't work well in passive-aggressive. Okay, other questions?
If they refuse to take the ownership,
yes,
and you go through this over and over again, they're basically taking charge of the situation, and you wind up going nowhere. So
I think at some point, it's just time to write them up. Kathy and Ryan, I'd like your comments. Oh, the question is, what if you keep going over and over again and you don't get ownership? What do you do? And my response was, at some point, you write it up. Ryan, what would you say?
And it would be interesting to get your insight. Typically, when I found myself in situations.
Oh, sure.
So in the past, when I've been in that kind of situation where it feels like it's going on, and it'd be interesting to see your input on this, what I usually do is at that point I do want to take charge. And I usually start with one or two phrases. It's either, if they haven't admitted to what's going on, then I usually say, do you understand the importance of what I'm saying? Or do you understand the importance of this issue? If they say yes or no, either way, if they say yes or no, at that point I usually define it. I say, your attendance is causing, and I give them all the reasons. Sometimes if they admit to it, then I get to that whole point of, do you understand the severity of this and the impact that this has? So there is a point that I do switch. I take control and I actually say, this is the impact, this is the severity, this is the expectation that's not being met. And that's usually how I kind of switch that to more from a dialogue to more of a, let me tell you what's the issue. So I don't know.
And one other really good thing is if you have somebody who continually will not see their responsibility in something, and you ask these particular questions, and you're still getting the kind of pushback that I was displaying here, sometimes, to your point, one of the best things to do is to say, okay, today we're not getting anywhere. I can see that you're not coming to a place of ownership. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting right now. We are going to get back together, and have it in your mind already what that might look like. We're going to get back tomorrow afternoon, and I need for you to spend the rest of today and tomorrow thinking about that, because when you come back in, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. But I'd like to see you show up well. I'd like to see you have this conversation with me. I'd like for you, and I actually use the word ownership. I'd like for you to take ownership. But if we can't do that, we'll have a different conversation tomorrow. Believe me, they think about it that night. They really have to think about, do I want to be here? Do I own any of this? If they really have that behavioral, I know the word attitude isn't good, but they got that going on, a lot of times it's time for them to say, all right, I got to knock it off because this conversation isn't going to serve me well.
Other questions? Great questions. Yeah.
So, I'm curious what, or how you feel we should respond when you were talking about the individual acknowledging an issue or being held accountable for a certain standard. So as an organization, we're in a mode of change. But how do you respond when it's not just about, well, others aren't being held to the same standard, but maybe others in another department aren't held to the same standard or held accountable, and you as a supervisor may agree with that, and it may be factual. But, and I know you always bring it back to still, your performance is what we're talking about. But I think it becomes challenging sometimes because folks feel like they're being held to a standard that maybe isn't the same standard or aren't held accountable in other work groups.
So to restate the question, it's really addressing the idea of, as a supervisor, how do you address the issue of inconsistencies with other departments that they might have a valid point, I guess? So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I'll take a take, and you can take a take if you wish. So my view would be you do need to be crisp and clear about the expectations of your department. You need to be clear about what are the dependencies you have on other departments. What I used to do when I was in that role is work with my colleague to try and be clear about those dependencies. Here's what we're expecting. Is that reasonable? It's much more of a negotiation with your peers. If for some reason the other department refuses to provide what I am dependent upon them for, then I start to talk to my supervisor about, here's what my team needs to be successful, here's my struggles, what advice would you have? But I always tried to work it peer-to-peer first to the extent I could. Anything else you want to add? Nope. Okay. I think what I'd like to do is have you focus on practicing this. It doesn't come easily, and I really want to make sure you have the time to practice it. So what we're going to do, hang on. Wait a minute. So we're doing a role play. I want you to spend about maybe 5 minutes to write your script. Write some of these tough questions about impact to citizens, impact to peers, impact to results. And then I'm going to have you pair up. Again, it can be the same person at the table or someone else. I'll want one of you to be the manager and one to role play the underperformer. And you practice this conversation, and then you'll switch, and the other person will play manager, and you'll practice it. After you've practiced the first conversation, do a 1-minute debrief. Here's what worked well. Kathy was giving me feedback. This is hard. I have to say yes. Give the person who was the manager feedback about which questions worked the best in getting you to own it. And then you switch, do the same thing, give the other person feedback. Have I been clear about expectations? Okay. So pick the same person that you used in the earlier diagnosis exercise, spend 5 minutes, and then role play it with each other. And here is your script on the slide. You also have your script on the piece of paper in front of you. Any quick questions about the exercise? Okay, I'll be roaming around so you can ask me questions. Give it a shot. At this point, you should begin to start the role play. Please don't talk in general about this training. Please practice it so that you leave the room with the actual tools. After one person is given the role play, please give them feedback on what worked well and what they could improve on. And then switch. So I'm hoping at this point the second person is now doing the role play. If you aren't there yet, then try and wrap up. Quick feedback, move to the second. Do you think you'll be able to wrap this up in about 5 minutes? Does that sound reasonable? Yes? Okay, I'd like you to wrap up, please. So, how did it go practicing it? I'd love to hear from a few of you. Anyone willing to give me a few thoughts on how did it work? I would love to hear how practicing it worked. I'll keep asking the question.
So I think giving good examples that you can actually discuss. Can we use a microphone?
Where'd it go? Okay, so giving good examples that you can help discuss. You mean examples of their performance gap?
Yeah, like what needs to be corrected.
Okay, giving very specific examples. In general, the generalizations don't work. On this day, at this time, here's what happened, and here's were the results. That helps a lot. What other observations do you have? Yeah?
I just want to share something with the group with One of the examples or whatever that we use was real, and it is going on here.
Yeah.
And when I would ask him questions or try to solicit information, he gave the very same answers that this person gave for real. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and there are certain behaviors that you will run into over and over again. And the main thing I would like to say is just try that closed question, is it this or is it that? And keep asking it. So yeah, there are common patterns here, and after a while you've seen them all, and so it's easier to address them because they keep coming up. Anything else? Were you able to get the ownership by the employee? Yeah.
Thank you.
What about when you get the ownership too quick? Like, yeah, I did it. I'm sorry. Now what?
So we all have these wonderful instincts that we develop as leaders. And if your instinct says, this is token, then you'd want to start asking questions to say, do you understand the impact this has on your employment? So you'd want to add a series of questions that really drill down to say, and then get clear about, okay, what is your plan to address it? And if they say, I'll just fix it, I really am looking for concrete action on your part that will lead to a change. Perhaps you don't own this. So circle back to the ownership thing if you need to. And so much, use your gut. That wonderful experience we developed from doing this over the years, it's so important to listen to it. Other questions or observations? Were you able to get some ownership here? How many got some ownership? Okay. Some, but not all. In cases where you couldn't get the ownership, what do you think was the issue? Was it a tough role player? Yes, I'm getting some people saying that. Needing some counseling later. Make sure you sort of say, I'm sorry, that's not my role. I'm just here to deliver expectations. Yeah.
I need that, but okay. One of the issues that we talked about was, so you go through all of this, you maybe have a performance plan, and then things go really good for, let's say, a year, maybe 2 years. Then all of a sudden, these things start happening again. I guess the question becomes, how often do we go into this repeat? We see really good, then we start backsliding. And there's a long period of time in between those. How do you handle that?
Boy, I think that's very situational in terms of what do you diagnose as the problem, and is it one that will continue to recur? So that's where the diagnosis is really important. It does become a judgment call on your part, and that might be when you engage HR in the process. That might be when you engage your manager in the process. Any other comments you guys have? Good? Okay. It does happen, and so try and figure out why it's happening over and over again. And you can talk about the pattern. This happened a year ago, this happened 3 years ago. The reality is that what the city expects of you has increased since that time. And so you need to know that the bar is getting higher. Other questions? Yeah.
Just want to kind of add on to that. Sorry, Brian. If you're going through that episode, that discussion, and an employee introduces a medical or emotional reason, sort of opens up and says, well, I'm depressed, or I have this issue going on. What's the next step at that point when they've introduced some tangible?
I'd like to hear Ryan or Kathy respond to that.
Usually the best idea is to say that you're supportive of any kind of situation that they might be going on. And then at that point I would recommend focusing on there's still a performance issue that's going on, and we can talk about that. And then also, at that point with any of the other medical issue, then refer to HR. That's usually the best approach.
Okay.
Does that kind of answer your question? But you could still separate the two things. It's still good to acknowledge that there's still a performance and expectation issue, and if they try to make that connection of because of my medical situation that's affecting that, then at that point it's, you can refer to HR, but still just isolate the actual behavior itself.
How does that change the timeline for expecting them to change their performance?
The medical situation? That's where it would definitely really be good having that collaboration with your supervisor. And usually that's really actually, even before going to HR, sometimes it's best to still have that conversation with your direct supervisor, some of your other co-workers, in the sense of your other management team, if needs be, just to kind of brainstorm that piece of it. But it's very situational when it comes to that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that performance issues are performance issues.
Sometimes, depending what you hear, it is going to be something where we're going to have to slow the boat down a little bit and determine what that issue is and how it might be impacting performance. But ultimately, to keep them separate as you can, is a good thing to do. Hence, give us a call because we can help diagnose it a little bit further and determine when we have to slow it down and when we have to stick to our course while dealing with another issue. So some of it, this is all wrapped into ADA. It gets really complicated at that point. That's why we want for you to go ahead and give us a call, and we can help you maneuver through that.
And just to let you know, we're using the microphone because we're also recording this for the makeup sessions.
So I'm going to start to wrap up, but I'd like questions at the end also. So just as a reminder, you will have these books, and there's an entire chapter that gives you examples of how do you ask these questions. So if you're about to encounter a tough one, you might want to borrow it from your department head. My hope is that as you encounter underperformance, you'll give this a try. Try it on. See what happens. See how it works. If it doesn't work the first time, try it again. Tune your script. I have role modeled in this class really tough bottom line management. And I want to be really clear with you that that is something you use rarely, only when you have to. So good managers have about 6 different leadership styles, and in the moment they decide, am I going to be visionary? Am I going to be a coach? Am I going to be a buddy? Am I going to be tough? Am I going to set a high bar? There's a wonderful article by Daniel Goldman that's called Leadership That Gets Results, and he clearly articulates the 6 different leadership styles and when do you use each one. I have role modeled being tough here, because this is a situation where if your normal people skills haven't worked, it's time to get tough. But I want to be really clear that you only use it when you have to. It's one of the least effective ways of motivating people. And so you use this tough stuff when you need to, when results are not getting met. Most of the time you want to be motivating, encouraging, asking open-ended questions.
Gretchen?
Yeah.
You guys recently received an email just this week, so it happened to coincide quite well. There's a training, and I can't remember who it is that's doing it, but it's on situational leadership, and it's exactly what she's talking about. There's various styles that you could use and when you would actually want to use them. So take a look at that. It might be an option you might want to go to. It's external from the organization.
Great. So I think we've had a chance to walk through the performance discussion and how you do it. Here's the overall model. It's really important to prepare up front, to have specifics, to have the agreement of your boss and possibly HR. Clean out your emotions, have the conversation, build the ownership, follow up, follow up, follow up. So if you have this conversation once, and don't follow up. What I used to do is actually put little pointers in my Outlook saying, every week for the next 5 weeks, I'm going to need to follow up. Because if you do this without follow-up, you get to do it again. It's really important to do. So, bottom line points. It's about results. It's not about showing up for work. It's about delivering what the citizens expect of us. If you get into the blame thing, it sets up this point-counterpoint thing that is just not constructive. You want to build ownership. You have to get clear about where you need to be tough. And that can be dependent on the individual. So I'm not saying that this is something you do with everyone. You want to use your own knowledge of that person, customizing this. With someone who in general knows they're underperforming, you may not need to ask those 2 negative questions at the end. So modify it based on the person you're working with. But if it's a really tough one, try those questions. And follow up weekly. The sources from this class is this book, which you have access to. Courage, the Backbone of Leadership by Gus Lee, who's a guy that lives in northern Colorado. And I actually found some really good things in The Distant Manager. So those are some of the sources. So what questions do you want to ask me? Yes?
I think with today, the approach has been of looking at underperformance because of the employee.
Mm-hmm.
What if there's underperformance because of the management?
The management above them?
Yeah. What if an employee is not the underperformance because of their management, supervisor?
Okay, so the situation is what if the what if the employee is underperforming because the manager is underperforming? So first of all, it is the role of the manager above that manager to hold that manager accountable. You as an employee cannot hold your manager accountable toward behavior. It just doesn't really work. So the people above should be holding that person accountable. You have the ability, I'm assuming in this culture, to practice something called open door, which is you go to the manager above your manager to talk about concerns. It is high-stakes poker. So my recommendation, having done that myself, would be only go to the manager above your manager if you believe that person 2 levels up has gotten similar information from others. It is a general problem, not just with you. Do not go open door if you are the problem. In other words, if you're looking like you're underperforming, going up 2 levels and complaining doesn't work. So you have to fix your issue before you try and talk about your boss's issue. Those would be my main suggestions. Do you guys have any others? So do it carefully. Only do it if you're convinced it's an issue that impacts a lot of people. And if you have an individual performance problem yourself, you won't be able to deliver that message with a lot of credibility.
I did have one other thing to add. If you really feel like you've addressed what your issues are and that this is something you're afraid of playing the high-stakes poker, call Ryan, call your rep, call me, and we can have that conversation too. Because one of the things I want is if you're going to go in and have that conversation with either your boss, addressing your boss directly, or above that, I'd like for you to have the tools that you need in order to hold that conversation well so that you can come to some level of resolution, be ready to hear what you need to own, and also be able to have that conversation where perhaps they can hear you rather than them feeling that perhaps you're just throwing a dart at either them 2 levels up even. So give us a call. We can help you prep for that conversation.
And I'll give you a headline on that, which is, I am having troubles with my job. Here's the issue I'm having. It's not about them, it's about you. Other questions? Good question. Any concerns you have about trying this on? Let's see. It's almost time for us to end this training class. Any comments you guys want to do to wrap things up?
I just handed out evaluations as our feedback form, so like usual, please provide feedback and then help to ensure that we'll provide the tools and the training that you need. So please complete that and drop it off on the way out.
Great. So I'm going to hang around for 15, 20 minutes or so to answer any questions you want to do offline. If I've mentioned something in this class and you didn't get it down, either come see me or come grab one of my cards up front and send me an email. I'm happy to make sure I've given you the materials you need. My request is that you try this on. Practice it. See what happens. Make it your own. As I said at the beginning, if you ignore underperformance, you tend to get to look at it every day. And if you face it and have those hard conversations, many people, when they understand that their job is at risk, will change because they want to keep their jobs. And then your job gets easier. Thanks so much for your attention. Thanks for trying on all this stuff. And I wish you the best.
Special thanks to Gretchen for coming out today.
We're still